David, Daniel and myself were raised in the times of Doctor Who, the 1960s. So just for the next few minutes, let's all just hop in the TARDIS, please. Let's come with the Doctor. I think it was Patrick Troughton in 1969. We're going to get into the blue police box and we're going to hop into the TARDIS. So let's just step inside. That strange sound, the lights are flashing, and now we're travelling back 41 years. 41 years. And he and I have lived in parallel universes. We've actually seen each other for the first time this weekend after 41 years. And it's been a fascinating time. We're best friends. We're two only sons. I have still a younger sister, so when we were friends we had a little sister who was 4 years younger than us. But here we were, two only sons, and we arrived at exactly the same time in a rough and ready mining and farming town in January 1969. And we were a little bit, probably a bit different. We were out of the mould a bit. We certainly weren't, we hadn't gone to school in that town, and here we were. And the world had just begun as far as we were concerned. We sought each other out at school. He was the headmaster's son, and that probably put him a bit off limits for a lot of kids. Oh, he was the man who gave us the cane or whatever. I don't know if you ever did that, Malcolm.
No, no.
But anyway, whatever. He was the man who made the school work and kept the discipline, etc. So, but we reached out together. We were both voracious readers, and we had an amazing time. And here we are in 1969. We've stepped out of the TARDIS, and of course we look up at the sky, and there were so many wonderful things happening in 69. And the background of the whole year was, of course, the moon landing. Apollo was on the news all the time, and in the middle of the year, obviously, Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. So this was the science fiction, and the possibilities were endless in our lives at that time. And obviously under those far horizons down at Ravensthorpe on the south coast in the clear air, we used to spend a lot of our time looking at the stars. And we were very lucky. We had wonderful parents, and we had a lot of freedom, and we had a large farm, nearly 5,000 acres, and we lived in this parallel universe of experiences that year, and lots of crazy things. We were boys, we were voracious readers, but we were also great experimenters and all sorts of things. And one of the things that David/Daniel was remembering, and I remember it so well, and I was actually talking to my mother about, we did experiments with things, and we loved making things out of chemicals and things like this. And one of the things that we found that we could do, and I don't know if you read it you didn't read it on the internet, that's for sure, wherever, we might have seen it in an experiment, was we could create hydrogen using simple stuff like caustic soda and alfoil and a beer bottle and water. And we make a beer bottle, this brew up, with the help of my mother, and we'd put balloons on it, and we'd launch balloons out into the bush and over the hills, and we'd put notes on them and things like that and send them off. And it was more or less like soaring our imaginations. And we had a fascinating time. And the farm that we spent a lot of our time on, our family farm, was an old property, and it had lots of ironmongery and things like that. And it had a fascinating workshop, and I don't think that David would remember this, but the workshop of this old gold mining town, the workshop was actually the old Baptist church that had been transported out onto the farm when the Baptists decreased in numbers, I guess, or something like that. But anyway, or maybe they built a new church. I think they might have built a new church in town. Anyway, there was this workshop that still had the arched window at the end, but underneath the arched window was a huge forge with a giant fan for blowing things, and there was a huge blacksmith's vice. And this was the sort of place we had, and there was strange hay baling machines from Edwardian times, and there was ironmongery and old homesteads with cellars and places like that. And we used to troop around all over this property. So we had this strange sort of combination of modern and medieval. Here we had Neil Armstrong landing on the moon, yet we were also voracious readers of Edgar Allan Poe, going back to the 19th century horror stories. So we decided we would make a rack to stretch people out. So we constructed it, and my father was very, very generous. He could weld, and he had a welder, and he had acetylene gear and all this sort of stuff. And I remember he made us a go-kart, a beautiful go-kart. But we constructed this rack, I know where we were coming from, and eventually we tested it out. I remember you being on it at one stage, except that we were too tall. And who was exactly the right size for this machine, who needed a bit of stretching? She was only 6, but my sister. So we popped my sister on there and gave her a stretch, and I think it worked because she's 5'10". So it was an amazing time, and we lived our lives. We studied very hard. David's dad, Malcolm, was just telling me that, and he was obviously in the world of headmasters and things at the time, and how proud our headmasters were of our studies and everything. We were voracious readers, and as I said, we got right into Edgar Allan Poe, and I was right there. I remember that I've been told that David had his first story published at 1986, but in fact I was there when he had his first article published, which was 1969, and David and I were the editors of a school magazine that was literally 3 sheets of foolscap paper run off on a Gestetner with hand drawings and David's comic strip, which was an amazing combination of Edgar Allan Poe and space travel. And it was all about saving a stock of Amontillado sherry, which was from one of Poe's stories, but this was set in with the moon landings and all that in it, so it was pretty unusual. So we published the Children's Corner, and I've spent the last few months trying to find a copy. I have the image of this little magazine in my head, but unfortunately I couldn't find it. But it sparked an immense amount of imagination, and that was our childhood. And I wanted to pick up something that Daniel wrote in an interview that I saw with David. And it's about Western Australian writing, and I know that Daniel's short stories go far beyond this, but he says, quote, "Most Western Australian writing that gets published tends to be of the cottage craft variety, something that would not be out of place at a country fete along with the homemade jam." And I know that David appreciated the homemade jam a lot at the farm from my mother Leah there. But we had this great imagination and this great ability, this great freedom to do anything that we wanted. And I'm very, very glad to see that he has pursued that. And it's certainly a dream of mine, and seeing him come together with these stories, this blend of looks at strange people, science fiction even in this collection, some of this material that I've seen, and you can see where all of that's coming from. But I'm very glad that you're getting to that place in your publishing career, and it's certainly something that I would and do aspire to very much.